This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Hey, Business Storytellers, episode 680, presented to you by Christoph's clone. Or maybe not. You might never know. How can I prove that it's really me? I don't know. We will find out. Maybe today's guest has a trick up her sleeve on how to do that. Helen Todd, she is the human behind Creativity Squared. You should check out that podcast at creativitysquared.com. How do you try and change the bottom? How do you collaborate with AI? How do you do it? Well, one way is to create an avatar of yourself, a clone of yourself. And some people claim there's a difference. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Helen is here to tell us what's an AI avatar, what's an AI clone, and when should you use them. But before we get to her, do not create a clone of me and put words into my mouth. That is not cool. But of yourself, why not? Helen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Christoph, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you. Nice to hear you. It's always great to have another podcaster on the show. The audio quality always sounds great without those big microphones in front of our faces. So tell me about what is an AI? Let's basic stuff here. AI avatar, what is that? AI clone, what's that? Is it different? Is it the same? How do you think about that?
Yeah, sure. So pretty much everyone already has an avatar if you're online, whether it's Meta's products of Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat, or if you're a gamer. Avatars are just digital representations of ourselves. To date, before AI blew up, they tend to be more cartoony, maybe cyber aesthetic for the gamer look. But avatars are very prevalent. With AI created avatars, the difference you kind of alluded to, deep fakes of like taking your likeness without your permission and then putting that content out there. So ethically created AI avatars are, created by the person with consent of their likeness. And what happens is I have a hyper realistic avatar. Her name is Helen Odd. I made mine at a green screen where my video presence was captured, and then I spoke into a microphone for about 15 minutes, and my audio was captured. And using the magic of AI, that video footage and my voice footage was then cloned and seamed together on the back end. And a hyper-realistic representation of me now exists. There's a lot of different names for them: AI avatars, digital likeness, digital twins, virtual humans. There's a lot of different terms out there. But when we talk about hyper-realistic AI avatars, they really are as close to you as possible, represented in a digital form that looks like you, sounds like you, but is not you at all. And the last time I got the statistic, there were like less than 1,000 known custom hyper-realistic avatars, but the market is set to be 270 billion for avatars by 2030, and that includes stock avatars, just the AI avatars that I mentioned, or avatars in the game-like or created ones, and then the hyper-realistic ones as well.
Well, what I want to know is, how do I know I'm talking to Helen even and not Helen Odd? How do we know?
Oh, maybe you are talking to Helen 2.0.
Well,
Right.
you let us know. You let us know after the fact. Maybe anybody can tell whether it's the real Helen or maybe not. So it's interesting to me, though. So the one, of course, the adult industry always seems to be ahead of everything, and I think it's because if you screw up, it's a relatively primitive thing, right? That like I mean, it's not that bad if you get it wrong, I guess. But there's one example. I've never seen her. I've never gone to her website, but there's actually Sophie or Sophia created an avatar, an AI avatar, and now she can scale her very personal business. How else, like how can other businesses use these kind of setups and, clone the right people, or maybe it doesn't even make a difference that it's the right person, so to speak?
Yeah, well, right now there's a lot of different tiers of avatars. You can almost think about them as cars of like your super luxury ones, which are very hard to distinguish from the humans. And if you think about more movies and CGI and cloning people that way, like Keanu Reeves was digitally cloned for one of the Matrix video games. Like that's probably your top tier. Mine's like that mid tier because it was done with a green screen in studio. And then you have like your lower tier ones that you can make in just a couple of minutes using tools like Hey Gen. But in general, the type of clones, like any business leader, enterprise, especially content creators, or people with online courses that have a lot of content and not a lot of time or aren't good going on camera. Digital clones are a great fit for that. Because one, you only have to be cloned once and then you can put your clone to work. Now, your question of like, how do I know if this is you or not? The upper tier ones and what's coming down the pipeline will be more interactive. The majority of clones right now at my level and like the Hey Gen level, you're really just feeding it a script. And then from that script, you're getting a video output. And you can use your AI voice to read the script, or you can actually upload your own audio file and then have your clone kind of lip sync to that script. So right now, like I'm the real Helen because I'm interacting in real time, and my clone really can only create video files. But they unlock great superpowers, communication superpowers. I only speak one language, that's English, and my clone can speak 28 languages right now. And as the backend tech improves, she, quote unquote, will just be able to continue to speak more languages as well. So that's also another great use case for any business leaders that want to reach other audiences in a different language that they might not speak. That's another great use case for using the avatars. And it just makes it really easy to streamline video content, especially if you don't have time. I'm not always in makeup and camera ready, but my clone is, 24/7 with the same energy and enthusiasm. So for, execs that their marketing teams are telling them, hey, we need more video footage of you, because that's, the way of the world right now for marketing is very video centric. But they don't have the time to be in the studio to shoot all of it. If they clone themselves, it makes it super easy to create a lot of video content and at a fraction of the cost to create the video content too. So there's a lot of cost savings, streamlining of video content, and just, duplicating people. How many times have you ever said, I wish I had a clone of myself? And now we do to help with some of the marketing tasks that, public facing people have.
It's interesting to me when it comes to the public-facing people. It's a few years ago. This is before AI, certainly. I went to this conference and I got this email from some random CEO, right? And it was obviously a marketing email, but it came from the CEO. Believe it or not, I ended up sitting right next to that CEO at a table. And I said, "Oh, I just got that email from you." And he goes, "What email?" Well, I haven't sent any emails. So it's kind of this, so it's like, I get it. Not everybody can like keep track of everything, but if the marketing team uses your name in an email, I still think you should know that emails are going out for this conference. So if somebody mentions it to you at the conference, you can talk about it, right? Plus, what's the point of the email if that's not the point, to encourage conversation? I would imagine doing the same with AI. It's very similar, right? So if I'm the executive, the marketing team uses my AI clone to do a gazillion videos, like I still need to know what that clone is saying, right? When it comes up. And how do I do that when it's actually at scale and there could be, who knows, dozens of messages going out?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that differentiates deep fakes from these types of digital likeness is consent. And AI can solve a lot of issues. Internal communications of companies is one that it can kind of solve, but that's really internal processes and workflows. Where if you do hand over your clone and give permission for your marketing team or PR team or whatever team it might be to create video on your behalf, you want to make sure that similar with any branding that you have brand guidelines, voice guidelines, what is is not acceptable of how the clone can be used. And if there's any questions in if your team is like, should I or should I not, making sure that there's an approval process. You certainly don't want a busy exec, clogging or bottlenecking the workflows and stuff. But there's foundational things that you can set up to make sure that your clone falls within exactly, why you created it and what you want to achieve with it, with the right setup and back end with your team.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. Is there, in your opinion, is there a difference between an avatar and a clone? I mean, I always thought about the clone. I mean, they're very similar, but maybe they're different. What's your opinion on that?
There's so much terminology in the industry. You know, they're kind of the same, like AI created avatars, although the word avatar is very broad in that sense of any digital representation of you can be considered an avatar, even more like fantasy related ones, which are very interesting. But when I talk about AI avatars, I tend to talk about ones that are generated with AI that represent you. But even then, there's so many apps where you can, just take a photo and they'll kind of turn it into a different aesthetic for you as well. So those technically count. And that's why the different players in the industry have a bazillion different names, whether that's digital twin, although that name actually, I don't personally am drawn to that because digital twins also are beyond humans. You have digital twins of manufacturing, of buildings, pretty much. You can have a digital twin of anything for simulations and online content. The virtual human economy, which my clone falls in. So virtual humans is another one that kind of connotes more of like the type of clone that I have. Digital likeness, the company that made mine, Render, that's what they prefer to use. But I would say they're kind of interchangeable now. And when you look at them, you can kind of tell the difference of like a hyper realistic clone versus more of those game-like cartoony looking ones that are prevalent in games. Even at the Apple Store, if you've been to the Apple Store recent, all the badges have like little digital representations of the people on their badges. Like that's an avatar as well too.
I know maybe I'm making this up, but I thought you talk a lot about collaborating with AI, right? Like how do you do that? So let's stay with the avatars. I mean, I kind of like in Claude or ChatGPT, I kind of get it, right? You go in there and you say, hey, here's my outline for my article. What am I missing? Am I missing anything? Read my article. Tell me I'm awesome, right? Or whatever. But like when it comes to avatars, how do you collaborate with that? What's like the use case or definition of that, I guess?
Yeah, so it's kind of I like to think of it of unlocking communication superpowers. And just making video content so easy. Um, my clone often makes appearances at events when I'm speaking. I personally don't like to introduce myself. I don't think a lot of people, like to read their bios as part of their introductions. So it's really nice to be able to have my clone introduce me and then hand over the mic to me. And depending on the audience, it might be the first time that they've ever seen a digital clone. And you kind of get that wow effect of like, that's not her, and engaging in that way. So live events are great. Online content. My clone makes appearances on social media from LinkedIn. I haven't used this feature, but a really cool feature is mail merging. You mentioned a CEO sent you an email. Very similarly, you can do custom videos like mail merges where you just put in like all the participants' names of an event, and then you can send them a custom video afterwards saying like, "Hey, Christoph, thank you for attending my event." So that's a really cool way to do personalized video messages at scale to whoever you're trying to reach, whether that's event attendees or prospects in your lead funnel, whatever that might be. Another great use case is online learning. If you have a lot of content, instead of going on camera and doing it, your clone can do that. So that's another really great use case as well. But there's a ton of different reasons, but anything that requires camera and a human, where either the human short on time or isn't good on camera or doesn't speak that language that needs to be, the clone fills in that gap really well.
Sometimes when something new gets introduced, maybe not sometimes, always, even AI, people say, wow, you're using AI for this. So for example, I'll take this podcast, I'll put it into Otter to get the transcript, right? 5 seconds, put it into Claude, say, hey, what other articles should I write? Boom. Might even get a first draft or a second or a third or an eighth, right, with Claude. And then I'll put it into Opus Clips and basically get some video clips. And people say, but you're doing it with AI. You know what I mean? Like, it's like this. And I'm thinking, why does it matter if the quality and the uniqueness is still there? So for example, in the example of using your AI clone, why does it matter if the person is interacting with the clone or whatever, or the avatar, and they're getting what they're looking for? Do you know what I mean? Like, who cares if it's the real person or if it's the clone, as long as it's the realistic playback of the person, I guess.
Yeah. So how I like to think about it, and I like to think about my clone as kind of like a digital puppet that represents me. But when you think about your communication toolbox and you're building trust with a relationship with a customer or a client or someone, there's like different tiers of communication interaction. Like the best is in person, because you get the presence of the person, the energy, and all the real time interaction. Second to that is video, and similar to this, where it's asynchronous, where we're going back and forth and nodding and seeing each other's reactions. Below that is a human video that's recorded to send a message. Think about maybe a niece or a nephew recording a video for their aunt or uncle, wishing them a happy birthday. Below that, I actually think it's hyper realistic clone videos. They look like you, they sound like you. It's the words from the human that have been scripted or written for that clone to deliver a message to represent them. And then below that is, images and audio, which also have the different tiers of touched by AI or not. So it's just another tool in your communication toolbox. And to your point, as long as it serves its objective in terms of delivering a message from the person, I think the utility of it, as long as it does what it says it's going to do, then it's going to be effective. I will say, though, I'm a very big component of transparency and always disclosing when my clone is in use. And I recommend this as just like a best practice, because I never want someone to be looking at a video and asking, like, is this the real Helen or is this the not? Because that's distracting and takes them away from the actual message itself. And similarly, if I'm like texting my brother and my sister-in-law, his wife, is like texting back, like, I want to know who I'm talking to. So she should disclose, like, hey, I'm on my brother's Chris's cell texting you this message. So I think just transparency and disclosure. And if people like you as the person and want more content, this actually enables you to deliver more content that you might not otherwise that they're looking for. So that's really great, and especially the more that you get up to influencers or big names or celebrities, this actually unlocks more content that your audience is looking for and that you can deliver to them as well.
So why does it matter? I mean, so I actually way back when I wrote an article on when you should disclose that you use AI, and now I'm thinking, I mean, sure, like for some things I get it, but why? So like for example, I'm not using a filter right now. This is just my natural beauty, ha ha ha. But like you know what I mean? Like when do I have to say I'm using a filter on a live stream? When do I have to disclose that I'm using a microphone to sound better? Or do you know what I mean? Like at what point does it just become one way of doing it? Like, I mean, if you pick on the filters, I mean, people can do all kinds of filters, right? I mean, like, which filter is making me look so different that I better tell people that I'm using a filter? I mean, like, where does it just become? It's just a thing, and as long as it's okay, it is what it is. You don't have to say anything about it. But like, so how do you decide that if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's contextual on the use case. When it comes to, like, I think it's just well, there's a few lenses or ways to answer that question, but the what I just mentioned in terms of I never want anyone guessing and then feeling kind of tricked that they thought they were looking at the real Helen and then they were actually looking at the clone. Like that's not a good experience to feel like maybe there's like a bait and switch type of thing. And some journalists have used that just to show, like, hey, how realistic it is. It's been used in some documentary films to just show the power of how good these are and then revealed later. So I think in some certain use cases, you don't want to use the transparency of identifying the clone because of a certain use case to reveal like how powerful this technology is. But just a good rule of thumb in general is just transparency to build trust. And you don't want to do anything, especially right now, because there's such a spectrum of how people feel about AI from fear to embracing and everywhere in between. So in this moment in time, even though I think to your point, I think we're going to be living in a world very soon where any text that we see, we'll just assume has been touched by AI, similar to the little squiggles under Word documents and Google Docs of like misspelled words and that type of thing. That is just going to be extremely prevalent in that regard. And I think there's a difference too between art and an artistic sense of using AI. To a certain extent, all filmmakers, and if you've been using Photoshop and the cloning tool, you've already been using AI. And it might be more of a artistic question if you want to use it or not. When it comes to, say, journalism, you want to know if something's been touched by AI because that opens up a can of worms of misinformation and that type of thing. So I think it's very use case dependent, but in this day and age, I would lean towards transparency because you're building trust and using it to build your brand.
Yeah, as a final word, I think there are good. I totally lost my train of thought here, but use it responsibly. Use it in a way that makes sense. And if you clone yourself, you still need to have to write whatever it is they're going to talk about, right? So if you don't have all that copy, really, really hard to actually do. Helen, really great to talk with you. Thanks for joining me. CreativitySquared.com is your podcast. Hopefully people check it out. It's a great show, and you share a lot of good information on there. Thanks for joining me, and we're out.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite